In Germany, Adolf Hitler stood before enormous crowds beneath walls of red banners and torchlight. His speeches no longer sounded like the promises of a politician. They sounded like warnings. Germany was rearming at terrifying speed. Factories produced tanks, aircraft, artillery, and ammunition day and night, while soldiers marched through cities that only years earlier had been forbidden from rebuilding an army at all. The Treaty of Versailles had tried to keep Germany weak after World War I. Instead, it created humiliation, anger, and a desire for revenge that Hitler understood perfectly. And now, Europe was beginning to realize something horrifying. Germany was no longer recovering from war. Germany was preparing for another one. But most leaders still refused to believe it, because the memory of the First World War haunted Europe like a ghost. Entire generations had vanished in the trenches between 1914 and 1918. Millions of men had died in mud beneath machine guns and poison gas. Cities were shattered, economies collapsed, families never recovered. Every leader in Europe understood one thing above all else: another world war could destroy civilization itself. And Hitler knew that fear gave him power. In March 1938, German troops crossed into Austria. There was no great battle, no massive resistance, no defensive lines stopping the invasion. Instead, thousands of cheering civilians filled the streets as German soldiers rolled across the border beneath Nazi flags. Crowds screamed Hitler's name, while flowers covered military vehicles moving into Vienna. To the outside world, it looked less like an invasion and more like a celebration. The annexation became known as the Anschluss. And Europe did almost nothing. Britain protested carefully. France hesitated. Diplomats issued warnings that carried no real threat behind them. Nobody wanted war over Austria. Nobody wanted to mobilize armies again. Nobody wanted another catastrophe. So Hitler learned a dangerous lesson. The democracies of Europe feared war more than they feared him. And once he understood that, he pushed further. Inside Germany, propaganda transformed Hitler into something larger than a politician. Newspapers called him the savior of the German people. Massive rallies turned politics into theater. Searchlights illuminated the night sky, while columns of soldiers marched endlessly beneath giant Nazi banners. Radios broadcast speeches into homes across the country. Children were taught loyalty to the Reich before almost anything else. Germany no longer looked like a wounded nation recovering from defeat. It looked like an empire awakening. And the rest of Europe watched nervously as the balance of power began to change. But Hitler's ambitions stretched far beyond Austria. His eyes turned toward Czechoslovakia. Unlike Austria, Czechoslovakia possessed a modern military, strong industry, and defensive fortifications built across mountainous terrain. It also contained the Sudetenland, a region with millions of ethnic Germans living near the border. Hitler claimed those Germans were being oppressed. The accusation became the next excuse for expansion. Suddenly, Europe found itself standing at the edge of another crisis. German newspapers demanded justice for the Sudeten Germans. Nazi propaganda flooded the airwaves. Threats intensified. German troops gathered near the border, while Europe waited to see whether Hitler would invade. And this time, war suddenly felt possible. In Britain, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain believed disaster could still be avoided through negotiation. He belonged to a generation that had witnessed the horrors of the First World War firsthand. Like millions of others, He believed almost any compromise was better than another continental bloodbath, so Chamberlain boarded an aircraft and flew to meet Hitler personally. The images shocked the world. An aging British prime minister, carrying papers and umbrellas, stepping into meetings with the most dangerous man in Europe, while newspapers desperately prayed diplomacy could still save peace. Hitler welcomed the negotiations, because every meeting bought Germany more time, more factories, more tanks, more aircraft, more soldiers. The negotiations culminated in September 1938 at the Munich Conference. Germany, Britain, France, and Italy gathered together to decide the future of Czechoslovakia. But there was one nation missing from the table: Czechoslovakia itself. Its fate was being decided by foreign powers, while its leaders waited helplessly for news. Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, and Britain and France finally gave in. They believed sacrificing part of Czechoslovakia could prevent a larger war. They convinced themselves Hitler only wanted territories populated by Germans. They convinced themselves his ambitions were limited. Most importantly, they convinced themselves peace had been saved. When Chamberlain returned to Britain, crowds greeted him as a hero. Standing before cameras, he held up the signed agreement proudly. Peace for our time. For a brief moment, Europe celebrated. People danced in the streets. Newspapers announced that war had been avoided. Families sighed with relief, believing civilization had stepped back from the abyss. But beneath the celebrations, something darker was happening. Hitler had just forced Europe to surrender territory without firing a single shot. No coalition stopped him, no army resisted him, no red line actually existed. And deep inside the Nazi leadership, confidence exploded. German generals who once feared Britain and France might intervene now realized the democracies were divided, hesitant, and terrified of conflict. Hitler's gamble had succeeded once again. The road to war widened. Meanwhile, Czechoslovakia began collapsing from within. Defensive fortifications were lost. Strategic industries disappeared into German control. Morale shattered. The nation had been abandoned by the very allies who promised to protect it. And across Europe, smaller nations began asking themselves a terrifying question. If Hitler came for them next, would anyone truly fight? By late 1938, Germany had grown dramatically stronger without fighting a major war at all. Austria was gone. The Sudetenland was gone. The balance of Europe was shifting toward Berlin, yet many people still desperately clung to hope. Because accepting the truth meant accepting something unbearable. The world was moving toward another global war, and this time, it would be even worse. Germany entered 1939 stronger than ever before, not because it had conquered Europe through massive battles, but because Europe kept stepping aside. Each victory came without total war. Each gamble succeeded. Each surrender convinced Hitler that the democracies surrounding Germany were weaker than they appeared. And now, he wanted more. In March 1939, the illusion created at Munich finally collapsed. Hitler had promised the Sudetenland was his last territorial demand. European leaders desperately wanted to believe him. The Munich Agreement had been sold to the public as the final compromise necessary to preserve peace. But only months later, German forces marched into the rest of Czechoslovakia. There was no negotiation this time, no discussion about ethnic Germans, no diplomatic justification strong enough to hide what was happening. For the first time, Hitler openly swallowed an independent European nation, and suddenly, the truth became impossible to ignore. This was not about protecting Germans. This was conquest. Across Europe, shock spread through governments that had spent years trying to avoid another world war. Neville Chamberlain himself finally realized the policy of appeasement had failed. The agreements, compromises, and concessions had not prevented conflict. They had encouraged aggression. Every retreat made Hitler bolder. Every hesitation made Germany stronger. Inside Berlin, Nazi officials celebrated another bloodless triumph. German troops occupied Prague, while swastika banners rose above ancient buildings in the heart of the city. Military convoys rolled through streets beneath cheering propaganda cameras. The Third Reich appeared unstoppable. And still, no major war had begun, but now fear began spreading faster than optimism. Because if Czechoslovakia could disappear overnight, who would be next? The answer came quickly. Poland, Hitler's next target, centered around the city of Danzig and the Polish corridor, territory separating Germany from East Prussia after World War I. Nazi propaganda immediately intensified. German newspapers claimed Germans living in Poland faced mistreatment. Radio broadcasts repeated accusations daily. The same pattern Europe had already witnessed in Austria and Czechoslovakia was happening again. But this time, Britain and France understood what was coming. If Poland fell, Hitler would dominate Eastern Europe completely. So Britain issued a direct guarantee to Poland. If Germany invaded, Britain would go to war. It was the strongest warning Hitler had faced so far. But by now, he barely believed the democracies had the will to fight. And in many ways, his confidence made sense. For years, Europe had threatened resistance while constantly retreating. Why would this moment be different? Meanwhile, Germany accelerated preparations for war at terrifying speed. New tanks rolled from factories daily. Aircraft production exploded. Young men filled military training grounds while generals prepared invasion plans. Roads and railways moved weapons across the Reich in enormous quantities. The German war machine was no longer hidden. It was visible to the entire world. And yet millions still hoped catastrophe could somehow be avoided. But then another shock hit Europe. In August 1939, Germany signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. The announcement stunned the world. For years, Nazis and communists had portrayed each other as mortal enemies. Hitler had built much of his ideology around destroying Soviet Bolshevism. Now suddenly, Germany and the Soviet Union agreed not to attack one another. Secretly, the agreement contained something even darker. Eastern Europe would be divided between them. Poland itself was marked for destruction before the invasion had even begun. The pact removed Hitler's greatest strategic fear, fighting a two-front war like Germany had during World War I. Now, he believed nothing could stop him. Europe stood at the edge of disaster, and everyone knew it. Throughout the summer of 1939, tensions spread across the continent like a coming storm. Families listened to radios waiting for updates. Governments prepared emergency plans. Soldiers received orders quietly. Ammunition stockpiles increased. Diplomats rushed between capitals trying desperately to prevent collapse. But the momentum toward war had become unstoppable. Then came September 1st, 1939. Before dawn, German forces crossed into Poland. The invasion unleashed a new kind of warfare the world had never fully seen before. Fast, coordinated, relentless. German tanks smashed through defensive lines while aircraft bombed roads, railways, and cities from above. Troops advanced with terrifying speed. Entire sections of Poland collapsed beneath mechanized assault, while civilians fled burning towns in panic. The world watched the opening moments of a conflict that would soon consume continents. And still, for 2 days, Britain and France hesitated. Some politicians hoped negotiations might somehow continue even after the invasion had begun. Others feared declaring war would unleash another catastrophe like 1914. The memories of the First World War still haunted every decision. But this time, there was no escaping reality. On September 3, 1939, Britain declared war on Germany. France followed soon after. The Second World War had begun. Across Europe, church bells rang while crowds gathered silently in streets, listening to announcements that many had feared for years. Some people cried openly. Others simply stared in silence. Because deep down, they understood what was happening. The world was falling into darkness again. And this time, the machines of destruction were even deadlier. The war that followed would consume entire cities beneath firestorms. Nations would disappear. Tens of millions would die across battlefields, concentration camps, bombed streets, frozen forests, and shattered ruins stretching from Europe to the Pacific. But in many ways, the road to that apocalypse had not begun in 1939. It began years earlier. With fear, with hesitation, with leaders convincing themselves small aggressions could satisfy a dictator driven by expansion. Step by step, compromise became surrender. And surrender became catastrophe. Because the most dangerous moment in history is not always when the shooting starts. Sometimes it is when the world sees disaster approaching clearly and still believes someone else will stop it.